Hi there, this is Human Life International's new Spirit and Life podcast. I'm the Mission Research Specialist, Tad Wojcik, and this is Father Boquet, our president.
Oh, very good, Tad. Good to be with you today.
You too, Father. So we're going to talk about your article, your Spirit and Life article from a couple of weeks ago called Your Heart is a Pro-Life Remedy. It's sort of a retrospective on the past year as we move into a new one. And I had a few questions. I guess the first one we should probably start with is just kind of a summary. Where are we now in terms of the pro-life cause at the end of 2021, moving into 2022? And what are sort of the strengths and weaknesses of our position at the time?
Yeah. Well, what I've done in the past with Spirit and Life is my way of really communicating not only with our donors, but with our readership base. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's picked up by different audiences. And my intention always at the beginning of the year is to kind of take a look back. What did we accomplish? What were some of the things that we struggled with? And, looking forward. And for me, it's always a chance. I try to keep it as good news. Always keep it positive, that even when we face some difficulties. So, for example, in the article, I mentioned one of our greatest setbacks last year, obviously, was the election of Joe Biden as president. Mm-hmm. Because pretty much what President Biden has done from day one in office has to be really advance the culture of death. Mm-hmm. Pretty much his agenda has been very clear. He's been very much inaugurating what he said he would do in the sense of advance the rights to quote-unquote abortion. Mm-hmm. And, the whole transgender issue, all the various ways to advance the culture of death. Right. So, so that's obviously something we have to deal with now for the next 3 years, and we're dealing with it. But we also have to look at the Guttmacher Institute, which really, showed that they are concerned that despite the fact that President Biden and his administration are advancing this cause, that there are, within the states, a tremendous energy happening with regard to advancement of pro-life legislation.
It's sort of a grassroots backlash.
Yeah, which is wonderful, and it's always been there. Mm-hmm. But and it's interesting for our audience to always hear that we think during when we have a president that really is with us in the sense of the pro-life cause, that we really accomplish more. And obviously under the President Trump's administration, we moved a tremendous amount mm-hmm. of pro-life legislation and inaugurated that legislation. But if we go back and look at many of the administrations that were not on our side, mm-hmm. the Clinton administration, the Obama administration, now the Biden, we actually are moving it further. Right. Why? Because I think it really stokes people to get awakened, to realize we're up against this foe, and we have to really stand together. And that's what's happening in the states, at the state level, right. Which at grassroots level, if you want to call it, and then it's moving up into the federal level, where it's getting mm-hmm. into the courts and getting into the conversation. Right. So I really see this as a positive. And of course, right now on people's mind is the heartbeat, law in Texas, the whole Dobbs and Jackson women's organization out of Mississippi, with
Dobbs
the whole
Women Health.
So you look at this and you realize that there's a conversation happening right now. Mm-hmm. That's one. It's out there. People are talking. Right. So it's making people talk. It's making people draw their lines. But it's also calling people of goodwill who see the opportunity to keep advancing it. So I really see the year before us as a very positive year, because mm-hmm. no matter what happens with the Dobbs-Jackson case, mm-hmm. obviously we're wanting the positive side of that.
Right,
but
right.
It's not going to stop us. It's no matter what that decision is, we're just going to mm-hmm. keep moving forward. It's looking positive. We want to keep it in that mindset, but we never know what will happen until that decision is rendered.
Mm-hmm. And wow, there are a lot of things you mentioned there, a lot of good things, a couple of hiccups and challenges that we have to face, some big ones. I want to start though, maybe we can focus on how you talked about that grassroots element, the state level, local, community level of kind of essentially reaction, or just galvanizing the pro-life movement at that level. Yeah. In your article, you talk about how there's a difference in worldview of the pro-life view, which is very community oriented. In a way, it's the most grassroots it could possibly be, because it's a family and home focused right. movement. And the anti-life position is generally kind of bureaucratic and top-down, right. and that's an element that we don't really talk about that much. I'd like to see if you have any other thoughts about that.
Yeah, we here at HLI, we've done this many times in trying on education, in our interviews and writing, to talk about how the progressive agenda, the culture of death, really does work from the top down. It tries to impose. It always pushes down. It uses government, education, media, the whole social media industry today, with theaters, magazines, and so forth, and the internet now today, and all the social platforms, really pushing down, pushing down. And what they could not accomplish in legislative bodies, they do within the court system. And so this is that top-down, heavy force.
That's the way abortion was legalized.
Exactly.
In the United States.
Of course. So here we are now, where where really the grassroots, if you will, is. I know in some countries the grassroots means a little something different. So for us, what it means is what you explained very beautifully: galvanizing people, pulling people together at every level within that civil society. So it's not just Catholics. This is a human issue. Life is a human issue, so it involves every one of us. So galvanizing people on every level is a way to elevate the conversation and to move that conversation then into action, into activism. And so this is what we, in a way, which has been part of our mission, was one, educate people. What are the issues? What is at stake? Get through all the muck of the political jargon and language and really expose this is the issue, these are the issues. And then bring that to bear. Then when people ask, well, what is that about? Tell me, explain. So educating people on those issues specifically. And then at the same time, education is good, very important, very necessary, but you don't want to leave it there. Now you got to get people out of their chairs, off the sofas, onto the streets, into their legislative bodies, get into their school boards, get into the local level, speak to their local state legislators. Push agendas and advance agendas that really bring the pro-life message, particularly the defense of the family, because, as I shared in that same article, my concern, is as we're moving one conversation, there's another conversation happening, which we can always, if we have time, we can talk about, but, we'll have many opportunities to visit on many of these issues, but, it's the idea that we can't ignore the whole package. As we advance the issue to protect human life from the moment of conception to natural death, we also have to look at what other things are affecting the family, what other assaults are happening. So,
well, and you mentioned the school boards. I think in Virginia we saw Human Life International is based in Virginia. The sort of reaction to a school board in Loudoun County that was pushing a transgender agenda, and people reacted and selected a pro-family governor. So there's kind of, you're right, there's definitely that side of the equation is something that HLI and the pro-life, pro-family movement needs to be focused on.
And that's why we
as
just got to keep our ears very attentive. We have to be very aware and, and not become, which we never are. I mean, pro-lifers are often accused, of being single focused, which, many pro-life groups have maybe a single focus within their mission, but all pro-lifers I have met are concerned about all issues that affect human life.
We're accused of being single-issue voters.
Exactly. But I mean, but it's still important that as we advance our particular cause or our particular mission, is to always be aware of the other aspects and how they interplay and how they interact, so that we can add our voice where it's necessary and so important to do so. So I would say that as we talk about advancing in the state level, for example, that let's say that the Supreme Court in its decision upholds Mississippi, all right, and now what we will see, depending on how that ruling is written, we know it's going to be thrust back to the states, and we already know that many states, like my own home state of Louisiana, is already primed with its pro-life laws, and there are many states like that. So this means this battle is not over. It's now moving where it should be. That is, in the states, among the people, among the citizens, talking about these issues, educating this issue, which really gets all of us involved. So that's why it really can't just be, and nor is it, simply a Catholic conversation.
Right.
It's all of our conversation.
Well, Catholic in the sense of being a universal conversation, right? Yeah.
Right.
But as Catholic Christians, Roman Catholics, we're going to shift gears a little bit, talking about the president, Joseph Biden. Obviously, it's an issue for all pro-lifers, but as Catholics in particular, it's important because Joseph Biden calls himself and is touted as a devout Catholic, and when clearly he's starkly in opposition to church teaching on most issues in the life and family sphere. So there's plenty of vitriol about that, and we hear about that all the time. But I was wondering if you could explain how we can sort of pray. How can we work for the conversion of, pro-abortion politicians and leaders?
Sure. Well, let's just use the March for Life for an example. So we go back to Miss Nellie Gray, great founder of the March. In the very beginning, in that infancy, I mean, different people had different positions, and Nellie had been given advice from very different camps, saying, yeah, keep moving forward. Others said, nah, we don't need that. But, what Miss Nellie understood was we need to be a voice. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is that, as we stand in solidarity, as we march in union with each other in solidarity and in prayer, we are voicing ourselves to our leaders. We're saying we disagree with you. Yeah. And so this is a way to someone like Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, many others, and so that's why, again, within the Catholic perspective, yes, and I think that goes back to our shepherds. That's their responsibility, and for us to to speak to those issues, and for us to educate people on positions being advanced by people like President Biden, which is not in line with Catholic teaching. So it's important really to educate, let people know, hey, sorry, that does not represent Catholic teaching, right. And that's very, very important. At the same time, we can state our opposition not only by educating, but we can also voice our opposition by standing there in witness. So like at a march, or maybe, in writing letters. There's so many ways that we need to get engaged in this so that we can, again, not allow ourselves, because what the media tries to do is sidetrack us into the conversation only from the Catholic perspective, which I think is still very important. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But what I'm saying is that we got to keep ourselves focused on the task at hand. And so, yes, we need to call out and be honest about this and say, sorry, President Biden, what you said there, Ms. Pelosi, what you said there, or anyone does not represent Catholic teaching. This is wrong. At the same time, we also need to not allow ourselves just to get focused on that and allow the media to keep us there. We've got to keep advancing the full conversation. Because with the media, it's, oh, look, no, he's a Catholic. He says he's a Catholic. He's in good standing. See, they're just trying to sidetrack the conversation. We just got to keep moving it.
So, because ultimately, it's the issues that are at stake, whatever he thinks or does, right? Right.
Joe Biden is not the one, as some of the archbishops have made very clear, he doesn't speak for the church. And so I think it's important, not to allow ourselves, to get into that little trap that the media tries to push us into. But for us, back to that, and that's why I think what's important is what we said earlier, Tad, was that, what gets people motivated is when they hear something like that. And they say, wait a minute, that's not right. And that gets people motivated. So basically, as much as we're against what Mr. Biden has said, he's actually helping us in many ways.
That galvanization is coming from
stirring the pot. So thank you. I don't want to see that promoted, but at the same time, I'm going to take advantage of it and say, no, that's wrong. And this is why it's wrong. And so it's important. And many people are doing that. It's making people talk. I mean, even on airplanes, I hear people, isn't it interesting that this was said? Well, yeah, that was said, but that's not Catholic teaching. What do you mean that's not Catholic teaching? So it does give an opportunity to talk. So and educate, form. So these are good moments, as hard as they are, and as difficult as they are.
Moments.
They're teachable moments. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think as far as the article is concerned, we covered the main points. Actually, there was one thing I wanted to ask about that had to do with the quote you gave from St. John Paul II. I'll just read it here. Man is called, and these are the words of the Holy Father John Paul II, man is called to a fullness of life which far exceeds the dimensions of his earthly existence, because it consists in sharing the very life of God. The loftiness of this supernatural vocation reveals the greatness and the inestimable value of human life, even in its temporal phase. That's from his encyclical Evangelium Vitae. So as we come into a new year then, because that's really what your article is about, how can we, as Catholics and pro-lifers, attain to or strive for this fullness of life in the spiritual dimension?
Sure. Well, as a people of faith, and whole last part of my article is actually, it's really the whole conversion, the whole transformation of our world starts in our own hearts. I mean, our personal call to holiness, the universal call to holiness. Each of us called as a Christian people, as a people of faith, as a people of God, are called to live in light of God's teaching. And that starts within me. It starts within my own heart. It starts in my own choices, my own actions. So again, as we said earlier, when things are being pushed down, and if we're looking for answers to happen, from the government, from leadership, or yes, we would love that to be ideally there. But if that's what we're waiting for, it's not going to happen. What happens, though, is when I myself, that's why I quoted Mother Teresa, if you want happiness, then go home, and promote it in your family. Start at that ground level, back to that grassroots. Start at its base and build and nurture that environment. And so for myself, really, it's motivated me, this whole cause, this whole pro-life movement that I've been involved with now, way back when I was in college, and here I am serving this wonderful organization that has a global mission. And yet, what it's teaching me is that it's personal holiness. That what's going to advance this mission is my personal growth in holiness. And then I add that to your personal growth in holiness, and so forth and so on. And this is what transforms our world. This is what transforms lives. And so this is why I end that article. Really, it's a conversion of the heart. And what I love about our pro-life movement, and I say this, so often, is I meet people of joy. Pro-lifers are people that are happy people. They're joyful people. They're family-oriented. We're striving to live rightly and righteously and virtuously. And we treat each other with respect, and we strive. We aim for it. We falter. Yes, we make mistakes. But, we know the right. We know the good. And that's what's something that really starts within each of us, because we know that we're called to love, we're called to give that love, we're called to share that love, and we're called in solidarity to stand with our brothers and sisters. And this is what this cause really does. It unites us. And so that's why the article I end is this call. And if anyone who follows me in my writing, I speak about this quite often, because it really is the foundation stone upon which everything else will be built.
And that the universal call to holiness.
Exactly. And so and I think that's the biggest challenge, before us in every year is, how have we grown? How have we matured? Have I myself personally grown in my relationship with the living God? And if that is, then it should be manifested in the way that I live, the way that I act, the choices I make. And that affects my brothers and my sisters. And so think about what you asked. So if I pray and really encourage the people in office, in leadership, give them a good example, show them, teach them. In many cases I've learned, Tad, over the years, and I never excuse anyone's behavior, all right? But many times I've learned in working with leaders all over the world. I've been in nearly 90 countries. So I've been in many places where people in leadership think they understand these issues and they don't, or they've been given misinformation. So when we bring light, truth, it offers an opportunity, to transform. And so how I approach those conversations, how I deal with these individuals really falls back to me. I can go in, and there's a time for all things. There's a time for firmness. There's a time for a gentle approach. We all have to know those moments and know when and how to use those gifts. But if we use them wisely, we use them rightly and prudently, then there's an opportunity. And I've seen it. I've seen conversion in leaders in various levels of government. So I know it's possible. So I know that we can do the same thing here in the United States. We just have to keep our cause going. And the March for Life that I talked about earlier is an example. I mean, where are we walking? Right down the halls of power. Where are we standing? Right in front of the halls of power. What are we saying? We're saying no. We're saying sorry. We disagree completely with this law, no matter how much it has been legalized and standardized and itself galvanized. We disagree. Sorry. We're going to stand until
galvanized at a level of influence and elitism, whereas the people, right, the voice of the people has pretty much always been to the contrary of those 1973 decisions.
Exactly. So we're trying to fight against that, like that galvanization that has been pushed in us. I mean, if we look through the media and so forth, yeah, absolutely. So I think we're at a good moment, you know, and again, I'm optimistic, always am, and I'm hopeful that, you know, that the justices that received the case in Dobbs and Jackson versus Jackson will actually do the right thing. You know, now what that right thing will look like at the end, we have to wait and see. That's my prayer. But I'm also poised, as I know many leaders are, that what's next? So that if we're given a positive movement, what's our response? So many of us are talking, you know, so if we get this decision, what do we do? If we get this decision, what do we do?
Right, it's not like it's a final victory.
Exactly.
We got to
Exactly.
maintain the momentum at that point.
Exactly.
To be positive.
So that's the motivation. So that's why I return back to prayer. So my personal growth, my personal journey with the Lord, and each of us do that, then we can bring the very best of ourselves to this great cause and really be a sharpened tool in the hand of God.
In that sense, what would be one thing that Catholics, pro-lifers, maybe we'll say Catholics, what is one thing in the spiritual life of Catholics that we can do this year to effect that galvanization, that spiritual growth, and becoming a saint, as you say in the article?
Sure. I mean, I would make it two. What I would say is that we have to use Cardinal Robert Sarah. You know, in a sense, part of this is that we have to really learn how to become silent in a sense of quietness, a prayerfulness, a real desire to spend time with God. The world is a busy place. Life is very busy, and we have so many responsibilities. But if we don't step out of that and really become nourished at the table of the Lord, to allow the Lord to fill the cup, then we so easily just get caught up in the business of the day, though we're doing something good. And so I would encourage us to really step into the quietness.
Feed that contemplative spirit.
Exactly. And the second thing with that is to avail oneself. You know, each of us has a different way of devotional life. You know, whatever that devotional life is, of course, as a parent, as a priest, I would encourage people, you know, to avail themselves to daily Mass, to our Catholic brothers and sisters, and, you know, and then also to pray with Scripture daily, to also what I would say we ought to embrace is some form of penance, some way of embracing a spiritual sacrifice for the good of others. Fasting, exactly. And so I think we have to find our own little way of responding. But as Catholics, we have a unique way through our liturgy and through our whole life. But to our Christian brothers and sisters that walk with us and accompany us, and our Jewish brothers and sisters, we all have our various ways of expression of this call to holiness, this closeness to God. And I would say, let's take advantage of that this year. Let's grow in that this year, and then step into those arenas, into those moments of activism, strengthened, you know, united, you know, to this great cause.
Right. Wonderful. Okay, well, I think we can maybe close with that. Thank you, Father. And thank you for watching Human Life International's Spirit and Life podcast series beginning today.